The battle that made the Marines. So today we're going to be reacting to a fantastic video by Dark Docs. I'm looking forward to this one, guys. We're going to get straight into it. All right, no introductions today. You know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Let's go.
General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, called the Battle of Belleau Wood, quote, the biggest battle since Appomattox and the most considerable engagement American troops have ever had with a foreign enemy. In June of 1918, as Russia had withdrawn from World War I, Germany relocated thousands of soldiers to France and launched a massive offensive to end the war. But as the German army breached the Western Front and attempted to advance to Paris, it faced fierce resistance from Allied forces. A robust contingent of thousands of American soldiers and Marines arrived to fight the weakened Germans in the Belleau Wood Preserve area, and the first large-scale battle fought by U.S. forces during World War I ensued. Fighting mainly in the dark, with fixed bayonets, poison gas, and hand-to-hand combat amidst harsh wood terrains and overgrown wheat fields, the Marines engaged in savage combat that cemented their place in history as some of the fiercest of warriors.
And troops, we can't argue with that. You know, Marines, U.S. Marines are known throughout the whole world for being, well, for want of a better word, extremely violent professional soldiers, okay? Now, I get the terminology, the Marines, they're not soldiers, blah, blah, blah. I get it, guys, but I'm speaking from a sense that that I'm used to. And Royal Marines Commandos, we are amphibious soldiers. We don't shy away from that fact. These men were warriors. To fight in those conditions, in that environment, back when war truly meant you were fighting with your hands, with knives, with axes, with weapon systems, and sometimes even with sticks and stones. These individuals had a different sort of fight in them, okay? Even to this day, we've got some fantastic forces around the world, but I just don't think we are from the same cloth as men back then. You know, they paved the way, and yeah, much respect to these guys. I'm looking forward to this one. Troops, please smash that like button before we get into it, man.
The German advance. In March of 1918, the Germans launched the Ludendorff Offensive, a campaign to attack the Western Front before the United States deployed all their forces during World War I. A peace treaty with the Russians on the Eastern Front had freed up around 50 German divisions. They were now stationed in France and outnumbered the local army. The Germans achieved significant victories during the first weeks, and after the Third Battle of the Aisne in late May, they reached the north bank of the Marne River at Château-Thierry. The enemies were now 59 miles from Paris, and it became a priority to halt their progress. On May 31st, the U.S. forces supported the Senegalese tirailleurs to hold the German advance into Château-Thierry, forcing them to veer towards Vaux and Belleau Wood. After several fierce confrontations the next day, Château-Thierry and Vaux ultimately fell, and the Germans moved into Belleau Wood, a square-mile game preserve beside a large wheat field. The area suddenly became an immensely strategic point, and U.S. forces were deployed en masse to support British and French troops. The American 2nd Infantry Division was summoned along the Paris-Metz highway. The 9th Infantry Regiment covered the area between the highway and the Marne, while the 6th Marine Regiment covered their left. The 5th Marine and the 23rd Infantry Regiments were put on reserve. Army General James Harbord commanded the Marine Brigade. The Allied forces would then work together to drive the Germans out of Belleau Wood. First attacks.
Look at these
On the evening
men.
of June 1st, the German forces pierced through the French lines to the left of the Marines' position. The American 23rd Infantry and the 5th Marine Regiments immediately marched over 10 kilometers to plug the gap in the line.
Okay, so in our world, 10 kilometers, you're thinking, yeah, okay, it's far. It's not that bad. But these guys were marching 10 kilometers to fight and kill other people. There's a different atmosphere associated to doing something physical, like 10 kilometers. It changes when you have to do acts of violence at the end, and you've got to be on top form. That's the difference in mindset. These individuals back then were just cut from a different cloth, truly, entirely, because, I mean, most people would struggle to do 10 kilometers now without any kit and equipment, without any reason at the end of that 10 kilometers now 10 kilometers might seem like a low number, but when you're mixing in fighting at the end, fatigue, battle fatigue, hunger, thirst, worry, dread, fear. It's just an amazing feat, guys. And they repeated this day in, day out. We just don't have a clue, man. We don't have a damn clue just how hard it was back then.
By nightfall the next day, they held a 12-mile front line along the rough terrain with thick bushes. This swift action might have prevented the Germans from marching into Paris. Meanwhile, the Germans set a major offensive through Belleau Wood, hoping to allow other German troops to cross the Marne River. The French had ordered to dig trenches further to the rear, but General Harbord had his men hold their ground instead. The Marines dug shallow fighting positions with their bayonets to target enemies from a prone position. On the afternoon of June 3rd, the Germans approached the Marines' location, but the Americans waited until the enemy was 100 yards from them to open fire. The attack proved successful, and the surviving Germans retreated into the forest. However, the demoralized French soldiers kept urging the Americans to retreat, but Captain Lloyd Williams famously exclaimed, quote, "Retreat? Hell, we just got here." Soon, the Marines stood alone, defending.
That's the American spirit right there. I think that American spirit is still echoed in some parts of the military and society to this day, although it is weakening, and some of you guys will understand where I'm coming from with that. That echo is getting quieter over the years. These men were steel men of honor, not afraid, and if they were afraid, they would battle through anyway. They'd rather plow on scared than retreat and be that guy. I don't know. I am a Royal Marines Commando, but I'm nothing in comparison to these men. Just off it's a generational thing, I think.
In the area. At one point, while Captain George Wallace Hamilton and the 49th Company were getting into position, they were surrounded by German machine guns. But Hamilton caught the enemies off guard, capturing the guns and securing them for friendly forces. He was later awarded 2 Distinguished Service Crosses and a Navy Cross for his actions. By June 4th, Major General Omar Bundy of the 2nd Division took command of the U.S. forces. That same day, Intelligence Officer Lieutenant William A. Eddy and 2 men infiltrated German lines and gathered key information. Having undergone heavy casualties, the Germans had dug out a defensive line through Belleau Wood. They were also consolidating their machine gun positions and gathering artillery. Though an attack was not imminent, the increasing strength of the German forces raised concerns about a possible advance to Paris. Over the next 2 days, the Americans managed to repel several enemy attacks. The French 167th Division eventually arrived, and the Allies were able to secure 2,000 yards of front.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
The heart of the battle. On June 6th at 3:45 a.m., the Allies set off an assault against the Germans before they could even launch an attack of their own. The French 167th Division attacked through the left of the Marines' line, while the 1st Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment, went for Hill 142 to prevent flanking fire towards the French. The Marines relied on their combat superiority due to their rifle marksmanship. Moreover, the open warfare doctrine.
That's something that the US Marines are known for to this day. The marksmanship. You guys can shoot. I mean, we do a lot of training in America with the US Marines, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Royal Marines. And you guys can shoot, man. We learned a lot from you. What we learned in the States from you guys in terms of shooting was instrumental to our success of being, some of the best troops on the world. I learned a lot about shooting, weapon systems in general. You just have a different relationship with the weapon system than we do in Britain. You guys are surrounded by weapons, brought up with them. They're a big part of the home in many cases, and yeah, I can definitely see how marksmanship would have been a very, very successful key skill to have in any war, especially the wars back then, because it's been proven, that British troops in many cases were actually aiming to miss subconsciously. We were doing things that psychology says, we weren't really aiming to kill because it wasn't trained in us, all right? There was certain elements of the battle space that it wasn't ingrained in us, whereas I'm guessing with you guys being brought up with weapon systems, with guns, There's a different psychology attached with that weapon system, and history proves itself as well. It's quite an interesting thing to look into, actually, the psychology behind pulling the trigger. And in World War One and Two, there's a lot of troops out there were actually subconsciously pulling the trigger to miss because they didn't want to kill anyone.
Of General John J. Pershing mandated fast-moving and aggressive attacks to overwhelm the Germans and push them behind enemy lines. During a German counterattack on Hill 142, Gunnery Sergeant Ernest A. Jansen withstood 12 enemy soldiers by bayoneting 2 of them and forcing the rest to flee. He became the first U.S. Marine to receive the Medal of Honor during World War I. And machine gunner Henry Hulbert was also recognized with the Distinguished Service Cross for advancing through enemy fire during the same battle.
Incredible, man.
As the second phase of the attack took off, the Allies failed to scout the woods thoroughly and missed a network of German machine gun nests and artillery. While advancing in waves from the west into the forest through the open wheat field, the 3rd Division, 5th and 6th Marine Battalions stumbled upon German machine gun fire. The 5th Regiment was shredded, while the 6th fought their way into the forest's southern edge. They encountered even more machine gun nests, sharpshooters, and barbed wire, and engaged in hand-to-hand combat.
Horrendous.
As the Americans were crawling and trying to survive against an implacable German force, 2-time Medal of Honor honoree First Sergeant Dan Daly flaunted his bayonet over his head and shouted the famous words, quote, "Come on, you sons of bitches. Do you want to live forever?" The Marines with him stood up and charged back. In the meantime, 2 companies from the 2nd Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment, crossed 800 yards towards the nearby village of Boresh. Without artillery support, the companies withered at German gunfire coming from the woods. The remaining Marines made their way into the village and bravely expelled the Germans. Despite having captured Hill 142 and gaining a foothold in Belleau Wood, the Marines endured crippling losses that day.
This is something that plays over my mind time and time again, especially with stories like this. Just try and put yourself in that mindset, in that frame of mind, in that space where you're witnessing these occurrences on a daily. Like, to keep with it through that circumstance, how hard must that be alone? How hard must that be to stay strong? Strong enough to face everything that's in front of you. Even if they didn't feel like it, they had to. It does. I do struggle to understand that mindset. Even though I've had a strong mindset to overcome certain things myself, I've got great pride and admiration for these individuals because it just seems like it would be impossible for me personally to get into that space, into that frame of mind, because I just don't think many of us would have it this day and age in 2022. I just don't think we're gifted in that way.
More than 1,000 men were injured and 222 lost their lives. It was the largest number of casualties suffered by a single American brigade in World War I up to that point.
Wow.
Commanding Officer Major Thomas Holcomb described the feat in a letter to his wife, quote, "The regiment has carried itself with undying glory, but the price was heavy. My battalion did wonderfully. There never was such self-sacrifice, courage, and spirit shown." Taking Belleau Wood. With soldiers from the 2nd Regiment of Engineers and the 6th Machine Gun Battalion, the remaining Marines continued to face German forces as they attempted to take Belleau Wood. The ensuing confrontations proved increasingly brutal. The trees were heavily splintered with shelling, and loads of deadly wooden splinters and metal shrapnel laid on the ground. The Germans resorted to mustard gas to halt the American advances.
Oh, God,
Numerous
no.
hand-to-hand clashes broke out, using knives, rifle butts, bayonets, and even
I mean, just look at that scene there. It's hard to depict it properly because it's in black and white, and the picture's not as clear as it could be, but like, these men were warriors, man, storming across the battle space to kill another man with his bare hands, already probably suffering from hunger, from other injuries, from battle scars, psychologically, emotional, physically, you name it, they've went through it already. And here they are, going to attack yet another foe. And there's everyone's innocent in this as well, even the enemy. They're just doing the same thing, but on the other side. That's the crippling thing with war, when you truly understand it. When you truly understand the nature of war, 9 times out of 10, both sides are innocent. It's the politicians behind the troops that are the problem in most cases.
Trench shovels. As Marine and non-commissioned officers fell, junior officers and soldiers took their places.
They're climbing over the friends there.
Still, by June 11th, the American forces had secured most of Belleau Wood. The Germans fiercely counterattacked 2 days later, attempting to claim their former positions. But the French army unleashed a decisive bombardment that lasted 14 hours, allowing the Marines to dislodge the enemies.
Wow.
The battle would continue for 2 more weeks. The Marines executed a total of 6 planned attacks to expel the Germans. Finally, on June 26th, a final confrontation in the forests cleared Belleau Wood of all enemy forces. Major Shearer submitted a report later that day that read, quote, "Wood's now U.S. Marine Corps entirely."
Wow.
Aftermath. The French government renamed the forest Bois de la Brigade de la Marine in honor of the honorable sacrifice from the Marines during that fateful month. And members of the 4th Marine Brigade were awarded the French Croix de Guerre. The battle was an essential step towards the defeat of Germany, but it also proved incredibly brutal. Out of 9,500 American soldiers, about 1,000 were killed in action, and 4,000 were either wounded, gassed, or missing.
Jesus.
The 2nd Battalion alone endured 764 casualties out of 900 men.
That is it.
Historian George B. Clark later wrote, quote, "For all intents and purposes, the old warriors of the U.S. Marine Corps were virtually wiped out." Despite its grim outcome, the Battle of Belleau Wood recognized the bravery of the Marines and changed the Marine Corps' lore forever, earning their elite fighter reputation and receiving the Devil Dogs moniker by their German counterparts. A German private later testified, quote, "We have Americans opposite us who are terribly reckless fellows."
Yeah.
For more epic battles and heroics,
we have Americans opposite who are terribly reckless fellows. That definitely sounds like a Marine to me. It doesn't matter if you're a French Marine, Royal Marine, US Marine. Marines will be Marines, and we definitely cater for a different type of individual. Even you guys watching this who are from different part of the military watching will accept as the good or bad. The Marines are different, man. I love that part about them. That fighting spirit, that warrior spirit. Especially the US Marines, they're known throughout history. And unfortunately, we can say all of these good things about honourable men, but in truth, they had to go through some horrendous things that, many of these stories will be forgotten. We say never forgotten, but there's some harrowing details within that story that will have just been forgotten in the woods. All right, some of the greatest acts of kindness, of loyalty, of love, of self-sacrifice, love, all went on in those woods, and no one will even know about it. But I'm here sat today of the understanding that that's definitely the case. That is definitely the case. There's some stories that we'll just never ever hear. They'll have went to the grave with those honourable men. Isn't that what a true hero is? By being put into situations like that, knowing that no one's there to witness these deeds that you'll be doing, yet you'll still do them anyway for the person left and the person right of you. That's true heroism. That's true honourable patriotism, And again, I'll say it again, guys, I hold my hat up high and proud when I say I am nothing like these men. And I don't think many of us are to this day. And I've served in the military, but these men were great men. But troops, that's the end of this video. Please smash a like if you enjoy me reacting to these types of content, and drop a follow to the content that I've reacted to. Go drop them a subscribe as well, troops, because without them creating this content, we wouldn't be able to react to them. Dark Docs, fantastic channel, up there with one of my favourite channels on YouTube.